Don't you wish it was just that simple to take a Windows gaming PC, put it in your living room, connect it to your TV, and then treat a Windows gaming PC as if it were a game console? Unfortunately, Microsoft isn't quite there yet. In fact, the only thing that they treat as first class citizens is a keyboard, mouse, and touch interface since Windows 8. Unfortunately for all of us, the lowly controller is still not considered a primary input for navigating Windows or controlling Windows at all. But up until this particular video where I've managed to do just that. This video has been about 2 months in the making, and I started with a large set of software, and I've tried to slowly dwindle that down to effectively you only need 2 pieces of software that you need to install, both of them free. Now, there are some things that you can buy. It'll be up to you if you want to do it. I do recommend some things, and we'll get into why I recommend them a little bit later. But you may have some questions like, does this actually work inside of a UAC prompt? UAC being a user account control prompt. Yes, it does. You say, well, what about when Windows has to do an update and it reboots? How do you sign in? Can you sign in? Well, yeah, you actually can. You could do either the virtual keyboard that will bring up that looks very similar to an Xbox's virtual keyboard, or you can do something later on, which I'll show you, where you can just directly map your PIN code to the D-pad via the secondary toggle mode, and then you can sign in that way. Now, what you're asking is, well, what happens when like Windows 10 or Windows 11 does a new point release and it kind of puts you through that out-of-box experience again? Yes, even the controller works there, and I'm going to show you why it works there. Now, getting back to the virtual keyboard, that operates very similar to how an Xbox console's virtual keyboard works. So if you have familiarity with that, this should be almost a one-to-one experience for you. Pressing X to delete, pressing Y to space. It's all very intuitive. So that answers a bunch of questions. We can control Windows through UAC prompts. We can control Windows on sign-on. We can sign in with a password, with a PIN code, pretty much anything through a controller exclusively without needing a keyboard and mouse. We have a keyboard if we need to type. What other things can we do? Can we Alt-Tab? Like if you need an ejector seat to get out of a program, can we do that? Yes, you can, exclusively on a controller, and I'm going to detail you all the steps on how that goes into it. And effectively, what we create is we create 2 modes for the controller. We create a desktop mode for a controller, which we can then say, this software will overlay all of the different types of inputs you have and correspond those to keyboard and mouse inputs. And then there's another mode where the controller is basically just a controller. It only does X input. And you will swap between these two at will whenever you want. Whenever you need to access Windows types of functions, you'll go into desktop mode. Otherwise, you'll just be in game mode. Now, the good news is, anytime you start a game, it will automatically just kick itself into game mode. It will automatically disengage desktop mode and go into game mode. So even if you forget, it'll kind of helpfully already do that for you. But just be mindful that if you are still thinking that it's in desktop mode, you'll have to re-engage desktop mode. But that's not really a problem, and overall, it's pretty simple. I'll explain my reasoning for how I set things up. The other thing I wanted to mention, which is a really cool feature, is this does work with Windows Standby. So you can actually put your PC to sleep and then wake it back up using a controller only. No keyboard or mouse needed, just a controller, and you'll jump back in. In fact, in some games, not every game, and specifically some types of emulators will crash when you do this, but if you just do regular PC games, technically quite a lot of them can still run, and you can put the system into standby mode, wake it up later, and jump right back into the game. So all of that is possible, and you should see video there showing that it's possible. The thing that I want to mention really quick is that if you were hoping to use Bluetooth for this exclusively, unfortunately, not all Bluetooth controllers are made equal. Some Bluetooth controllers do not have the capability of wake on Bluetooth, which is unfortunate. Some Bluetooth controllers do, but every system that I tried, mine personally, all on the Intel side, do not. So I had to pivot over to an Xbox Wi-Fi adapter. Shout out to Everborn Saga for mentioning this to me, because he actually led me down this path, because I was trying to go down the Bluetooth path because it's a little bit more open and a lot of people are going to have it. But with all of the problems that are in the Bluetooth stack, let me explain. So in the Bluetooth stack, even if it does support wake from Bluetooth and you can enable that on the controller, no problem. If it doesn't support it, then you're out of luck. The other thing that helps with the Xbox adapter, if you're going to be buying the Xbox adapter, which I do recommend, is that number one, when I was playing on the first month, I actually was doing it with Bluetooth. But when you do a Windows update and it updates Intel's drivers for Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, it kicks off the controller. And then I had to go and plug in a keyboard and mouse, which means that the whole Bluetooth stack idea really isn't ideal at all, because any driver updates that happen on that Bluetooth stack can potentially kick off your controller. And that's really going to just make you really have a bad time. So the Xbox adapter, the new one, the Xbox One adapter, that one has not had a driver update in like 2 or 3 years. So you're not really going to have a problem with that. I don't anticipate that they're going to be updating that anytime soon. The other part that is nice is it does support Wake all the time on all Xbox One adapters, and it does not use Bluetooth. It actually uses Wi-Fi Direct. So you get further distance and better latency. So it's already 3 pluses that I can easily account for across everything over Bluetooth. And that is why I recommend using the Wi-Fi adapter over Bluetooth. Even though we can get a lot of things working, not every Bluetooth controller is going to be working. Now, for my particular setup, I'm using the Beelink GTI Ultra and EX docking station. What they wound up sending me was the GTI 12, which features the Intel 12900 HK with 32 gigs of RAM and 1 terabyte of storage. That is fine for the PC side. What's really cool is the GPU dock. They call it their EX docking station. This effectively has 2 PCIe slots on the dock itself. One is the 16X slot, which basically translates to an 8X PCIe 4.0 slot for the GPU, which honestly is enough bandwidth. What's nice about this setup is that I can use a full-fat GPU. Specifically, I'm using the AMD 7900 GRE. My initial goal for this was to actually use Bazzite or a SteamOS alternative so that I could still have a gaming PC that is really small, but with a full-fat GPU that the Bazzite SteamOS would support. But because I was getting a little frustrated because I wanted to use Game Pass, I was trying to see if I can challenge myself and see if I can get a controller working on this particular setup. I really love this setup. You do not necessarily need it, but it is really small. And because we can use a full-fat GPU and the latest GPUs that we have out there, honestly, they're very, very quiet, even though they're air-cooled. Here, I want you to listen to this right now. I really want you to take a look at what you're looking at there, because that is Indiana Jones running at 60 FPS at 4K with supreme settings. Remember, this is an AMD card, so I don't have DLSS here. I don't even have FSR or XeSS, so this is 4K native. Now, I don't have path tracing either because that's NVIDIA only, but this does have real-time global illumination enabled by default in the game. It looks incredible, 4K native at supreme settings and still getting 60 FPS. It really is amazing with how small this form factor is with a full-fat GPU. Effectively, the price is around $1,300. However, this guide is fully agnostic, so you don't even need to use the PC that I'm talking about here. I just really like it. Also, it was my idea that I had sent to Beelink, although I had the GPU front-facing so that it didn't have any obstruction. And also, I thought it would be a nicer look, because then you could have just the GPU nice in front on display and have the mini PC in the back. Regardless, I still love the idea, but you don't have to use it. You can use any gaming PC. And when we're done with this how-to guide, you don't need any launchers installed whatsoever. After we're done here, you'll be able to fully control Windows using an Xbox controller and be off to the races. And then you can install whatever you want. Now, on the guide, I do install Steam. I love Steam, and Steam does offer Steam Input, which I do recommend. You don't necessarily need it, but it's still a choice that you can make. Let's get into the guide right now. This part of the video will serve as a complete how-to guide for setting up a controller to replace the keyboard and mouse on a Windows PC. You should be following this guide if you want to turn your Windows PC into a gaming console of sorts, so that you do not require a keyboard and mouse anymore, and all of Windows can be controlled with a controller. Up here we have 3 different websites, and I'll have the links in the description field below. The first one is JoyXoff, and you can see that right here. This will be able to get the latest version at all times for you, but the secret sauce to make JoyXoff work without a keyboard and mouse all the time is going to be this particular software, the HP RGS Vmouse Virtual Mouse Driver. This is a software that I had to extract from an older version of HP RGS. It has since been renamed to HP Z Central Remote Boost, but this version is all we need. I've uploaded it to archive.org as well as Mediafire. However, I do recommend that you download it through archive.org, as there's less bogus stuff on there and less ads. But if you need to and archive.org is not working, feel free to go ahead and use the Mediafire link. I've already gone ahead and given you the MD5 checksum so you can check against the file that you download to make sure that you're downloading the correct file. So we'll go ahead and download the latest version of JoyXoff. And we're going to go to archive.org. We'll go to show all files. And then in here, you can see the Vmouse setup. And we'll go ahead and download that as well. So it is downloading here. Once this finishes, we'll go ahead and open up our download directory and start installing the software. Now, it is very important that we install everything here. JoyXoff by itself is quite competent software. However, there is a lot missing. In fact, if you do not have the Vmouse driver when you reboot the machine and there is no mouse or keyboard connected, you won't even have a cursor. So it becomes quite difficult to actually use. There's other things that Vmouse setup does for us with the driver, and I will show you that in a moment. Up first, let's go ahead and extract JoyXoff. Windows will be able to extract .rar files now as well, so you should be able to extract it. I use 7-zip myself, so it's up to you what you want to use. So for this, we'll just go straight ahead and install JoyXoff. Now, the initial setup will require a keyboard and mouse to set up, obviously, because the controller will not operate as you need it to. So now that we've installed JoyXoff, the next thing we have to do is install Vmouse Setup. When we install Vmouse Setup, this will install a driver, and this effectively acts to the computer what the computer thinks is a mouse that is always installed, an actual hardware mouse. So as far as Windows is concerned, after this is done installing, Windows thinks that there's an additional mouse installed, and that is quite important for us because we won't be having a mouse and keyboard installed all the time. And sometimes there are games that require a mouse and keyboard just to be present for them to launch on Windows, which can cause some of the grief that we often get. Now you've seen that I had a reboot prompt. At this point, we'll go ahead and reboot the system, and I'll show you where it is. Prior to rebooting your machine, you should have seen this dialog box come up where it says JoyXoff allows you to control mouse and keyboard with an Xbox controller. I went ahead and X'd out of it and then rebooted. Upon rebooting, this popped up again. So you can go ahead and click X before rebooting your machine, and then after rebooting, it'll pop up again. We do want to use this feature, so we will say yes here. Now, I'm going to step you through a few different options here, what I consider to be optimal settings for using the controller, because effectively what we're going to be doing is we're going to be setting up a desktop mode for the controller and then a way to disable the desktop mode so that it just falls back to the original X input mode. Before that, I want to just quickly show you the device manager, the HP RGS virtual mouse. So you can see right here in Device Manager, Vmouse, HP Virtual Mouse, this is installed. If we click here, it says this device is working properly. As long as this is up, this is quite critical to make sure that we don't have any problems going forward with using JoyXoff. Now that we're back at the JoyXoff default screen, which is the Profile tab, which we'll get into desktop bindings in just a moment. First, what I want you to do is go to General. All of these should be checked for you. The one thing that we want to check, and that's super important, is this one right here. Run on UAC prompts and sign-in screen. So now that we're back here, you have this checked. Go ahead and click Apply. You're going to say yes to this. Now at this point, you don't see anything. So what you're going to want to do is just go down here, and you can see that JoyXoff is still running just in case. Go ahead and right-click and click Close. We want to see that go away. And then we're going to go ahead and open it again. And you should see either a little caret symbol that will pop up and it'll be kind of hidden, or you have already disabled that so you can start seeing this. You're going to go ahead and right-click on that, and you're going to go to Settings. Now, what happens when you do this is that this installs JoyXoff as a system-level service. So if we go to services.msc and we go to JoyXoff, you can see the JoyX off trigger service. It's running and it's set to automatic. This is the key to everything, and this makes it so that JoyX off runs on UAC and on sign-on, which is very helpful for a host of reasons that I will touch on this video. At this point, all of these settings are fine. We'll go to advanced. These are some settings that you can go, and these are all to taste. You don't necessarily need to change anything, but if you want to, you can. Going into profiles, this is where I like to set up things a bit different. By default, it wants to set up the A button as left mouse and B as escape. What I prefer to do is actually setting up the controller so that we are effectively making a desktop mode, but the desktop mode of the controller will work on a lot of older games and not necessarily, it is a very PC game kind of setup. So I'm going to go ahead and skip to that scene so that you can see it, and then you can just copy that if you want. All right, so here we are, and I'll go ahead and explain a few of the settings that I have here. So up top, you can see that I have changed this to enable disable bindings. Now, what you're going to want to do is you'll right click on this, you go to JoyX off, and that's where you'll enable disable bindings. Honestly, this is to taste. This will actually only enable when you hold down the Xbox button. It's not just pressing the Xbox button, it's holding it down. Now, you could, if you wanted to, kind of have this off, so just have this do nothing, because you want to, for instance, use Steam Big Picture mode when you press the Xbox button. That is also an alternative that you can do. It would just mean that in the secondary settings, I have Alt-Tab here. If you wanted to disable desktop mode, you would have to, by default, it's already going to be here. So in JoyX off, it'll say enable disable bindings here like this. That is the default setting. So if you did select and then start, that would enable or disable the desktop settings, which is everything right here. Effectively, you would go to a desktop mode for your controller or just a vanilla X input mode by itself. So the controller basically goes back to defaulting as a controller instead. So I particularly say do this for have enable and disable bindings, because how this works is that when you hold it down, you get a little rumble, and I'll show you where that little option is if you want to disable that as well. But if we go through, the select key on the Xbox controller is to use secondary bindings, and that is for this entire set. Now for start, I set as escape because escape is often what a key is used for bringing up the menu, pausing older games, or just getting out of things in desktop. This is a very, very intuitive way to have the start button function on a controller. For A, I have it as the spacebar because for a lot of overlap on PC games, that's going to be your jump button. For B, I have just a left control key. So if we go to keyboard and select key, you can see that this is left control. The reason I chose this is that this is a type of control action key for a lot of PC games, but B is also crouch in a lot of games. So this kind of corresponds to the B button in a lot of different ways. For X, I chose the E key on the keyboard. Again, you can just right click on any of these. You go to select key and I chose E here, and E is pretty much the default use key on generalized FPSs. So I have E here, but this can translate to pretty much anything, and you can update whatever you need to for any particular game in its settings. And then for Y, I have the Z key. Now for the left bumper and right bumper, you may want to set this to taste. You may want to swap these, but for left bumper, I have left mouse button, right bumper, I have right mouse button. For left shift, for left trigger, I have left shift. So if we go here, you can see left shift is done. And for right trigger, I have the C button. And this is just an additional action button that I'm mapping to the right trigger. For these will already be set for you. These are literally already set to the cursor keys already. You can verify those, but this is great because this is not only going to work for older games where they have characters being controlled by using the cursor keys, which will translate perfectly to a D-pad, but this is also a primary way to scroll up and down in lists or your scroll wheel for just going through lists. This is a great way to go up and down or left and right inside of Windows, just navigating Windows. I continue to have L3B, the show virtual keyboard. You can see that right here. So I brought that up. And when you look at this, this comes up as what would be a very Xbox-centric. So if you use an Xbox console, this is the type of keyboard that comes up. It is very intuitive and works much like an Xbox keyboard does. Now, I have the R3 button being the middle mouse button because I have the right analog stick set to mouse movement. And I choose mouse movement because, again, if you're going to be playing games that don't really have X input, the right analog stick will translate better to mouse movement because mouse movement is also how you look around. So this is a one-to-one. And then in the left analog stick, I just have it be WAS keys right here. And obviously WAS keys make sense because WAS translates to the left analog stick for a lot of FPSs. Whenever you get all of these set up, you can go ahead and click apply. If you go into the secondary settings right here, now again, this is automatically set to enable disable bindings. This is the default, and you could have the Xbox button be nothing up here. If you wanted to use Steam Big Picture mode for the Xbox controller, you can go ahead and keep this. What I like to do instead is I like to change this to Alt-Tab. So this way, when you hold select on your Xbox controller, you can just hammer away at start, and that will be your Alt-Tab key as far as Windows is concerned. All of these are pretty much to taste. The only thing that I would suggest is that you have all of these keys, right? All of these you can use to essentially log in. This is an easier way to when signing into Windows if you had to restart your machine because you needed drivers or something. So once you restarted your machine, you can go ahead and do 1234 if 1234 was your PIN code, but you would change this to whatever your PIN code was so that you can go ahead and log in. So that is what I would use personally for setting up your PIN code so that you can sign in a lot easier. At that point, all of your controls are now set up for a better use case for using the Windows desktop generally. And also you can default to this mode so that older PC games more or less just work without very much muss or fuss. There may be a few keys that you have to set up in the control panel or the game's controls itself, but for a lot of games, a lot of these are just going to automatically translate, and you can actually start playing automatically with these particular setup. So this is why I like this setup right here. Now, this is done, so we're going to go ahead and click OK. If we go to general, all of these are how your setup should be. If we go to mouse, all of this is going to be to taste. So now you can see this is my mouse, but if I go ahead and use the controller, you can see that this is my right analog stick that we set up. You can see that this looks very much like a controller. Now, if I press in L3 again, you can see that the keyboard pops up. So pretty straightforward. Now, one thing that I would say that you should do is just look through these. By default, a lot of these are really good. In the advanced settings, if you need to change the dead zones for any particular reason, you can go here. One thing I like is this vibrate the controller when bindings are enabled and disabled. Again, in our particular profile here, I have this being hold the Xbox controller button. Again, not just tap, but hold it. So then when we go to advanced, when you hold it, it will actually vibrate the controller to let you know if the controller is in a desktop mode or out of a desktop mode. Essentially, out of a desktop mode means that the controller is effectively a vanilla X input controller. So then there is no extraneous other controls being relayed to the system. And that's pretty much everything that you need for Joy X off. Now, there are some next steps that I would suggest, and we're going to go into them. So when we are in the Steam settings, what you should do is you should go to controller. Now, what I would suggest is you would have guide button focuses Steam. I would disable guide button focuses Steam. Now, this does not change Steam from running big picture mode. This only changes the guide button if Steam is not the center, what is in focus right now. If I press the Xbox button, it does not bring up Steam at all. But if we have Steam opened and I press the Xbox button, it will bring up Steam Big Picture mode. So it's really just about Steam being the active window before Steam Big Picture mode will activate or not. And that's the only reason why I disable it. It doesn't actually stop Steam Big Picture mode from starting when you press the Xbox button. It just disables the Xbox button from bringing up Steam if that's not what you're currently looking at, which is not very helpful for any particular game that you want to be playing when you press the Xbox button. If you're in Xbox Game Pass, for instance, you don't want Steam to be popping up. The only other thing that I would suggest is that there is an Xbox Extended Feature Support driver. You can see it says uninstall right now. If it says install for you, go ahead and click that. When you click that, it may take a second or two, but eventually it's going to say it's going to have to restart your machine because it's installing drivers. Go ahead and click OK, at which point you're going to restart and then have that Xbox Extended Feature Support driver installed for you. If you do Windows R, it's going to bring up the run command. And if you do powercfg.cpl, this is going to bring up your power settings. I would suggest changing this to whatever you need it to. So if you need to turn the display off at 10 minutes and you want, well, this is on battery. If you are plugged in and you want it to turn off in 10 minutes and you want to put the computer to sleep in 10 minutes, you can do that. Now, the only thing that I would say here for putting the computer to sleep, and we're going to discuss this in the video, is that while Bluetooth can work, you really should have the Xbox wireless adapter, as it's proven time and time again that it's the best method. But again, the reason why I suggest using the Xbox wireless adapter is for a number of reasons. You can see that I have the Xbox wireless controller on Bluetooth right now, and it's obviously working. The problem happens whenever there's a Windows update that is happening in the background. If there's an update to any of the drivers, so if you have like an Intel stack and it updates your Bluetooth drivers, this will disconnect your Xbox wireless controller, and then you're going to have to go and get a keyboard and mouse to then resync your wireless controller. It's a big pain, and I have not found any way that you'd basically have to disable any updates to your Bluetooth driver, which you can do, but it's a little bit outside the scope of this video. And also, I'm not really a fan of disabling driver updates, and just using the Microsoft Xbox adapter also uses Wi-Fi Direct, which offers better latency to Xbox controllers over Bluetooth. So it does offer a benefit outside of just that. It's really just a more ideal setup. So while Bluetooth can work, I really would advise you to get that. All right, so at this point, I have disabled the controller. So if you see, if I hold down the Xbox button, this is the mouse from the right analog stick, but I'm going to go ahead and hold down Xbox again. And now that is disabled, I am back into a pure X input mode. Condemned is downloading. So we'll go in here. While that's downloading, we're going to go ahead and select Steam Input because Steam Input's pretty awesome. Yes, we're going to go ahead and enable that. So we're going to go and take a look at some community layouts, and let's do 360 controls because that'll make the most sense. We'll go ahead and enable that. And right there, you see it says joyX off, auto disable on full screen application. So right now it is like the desktop mode is disabled, but I was already in that mode anyway.
Come on, let's go. Body's rotting as we speak. The patrolman on duty said there was a mannequin involved, just like the matchmaker. Whole damn city's crawling with sick killers.
Okay, so that's select, which is fine. But so this would basically give you like an idea of what you need to do. And you could always just, hit select, press the Xbox button, and then take a look at the controls to see what they align to so that you know what you need to press, or choose a different community control setup. The one last bit that we should talk about is problem areas for some PC games that are real bad corner cases, like The Binding of Isaac. So if we go ahead and click play on this, you'll see that it's going to go ahead and launch. We're going to see this initial window, and then the window just kind of goes away. Okay, that's kind of weird. So let me go ahead and enable desktop mode on my controller. I don't see anything. Let me go ahead and press Alt-Tab. All right, I don't see it there. It's not showing.
Isaac and his mother lived alone in a small house on a hill.
So we can see that Binding of Isaac is running. So one thing that we can do is we can get lossless scaling. Now there's also free software called Magpie, but lossless scaling is like a $6 app, and honestly, it's really worth it. So one thing that I love about this is that you can just press this scale button, and then you have 5 seconds. So we'll go ahead and left click on that. And there is the Binding of Isaac. So I can move because I have WASD to move, and I attack with the D-pad, which is not super great. And there we are. So then I can kind of tab around to wherever I need to go. I'm doing select and X right now. And that's it. So that's it for the guide. As I said in the guide, this is really just a foundational starting point for where you want to be able to control Windows completely with the controller all the time. Wake it from standby, use it on sign in. Across the board, everything will be just controllable from the controller alone. Initially, when I got this, especially with that AMD 7900 GRE GPU, I was leaning towards going to Bazite. But because I wanted to use Game Pass and it was just annoying me, I really wanted to tackle this. So for the past 2 months, I've been trying it. The past month, I've really honed down to just those two pieces of software. Generally, the driver as well as JoyX off to get it to a point where that's all I needed, and I haven't had a problem since. You will have some issues, like I had already showed, with specific older games that may just run in a window. And on Windows 11, Binding of Isaac is kind of super broken, but we do need lossless scalar to upscale that so that it will fill in the entire display without having a window. Lossless scalar is like $4 or $5. It's probably on sale right now during the Christmas sale. So I still recommend lossless scalar. I bought it years ago before it started doing all the fancy stuff that it does now. It is a very good piece of software for general PC use regardless. So I do recommend it, but it's not super necessary, especially if you're going to be playing more modern PC games. You're not really going to be having those particular issues. Outside of that, when I play Game Pass games, like when I'm playing Starfield, it just plays. Everything is just fine, works great. One issue that I did have that I managed to record just recently was I wanted to load up Ratchet and Clank. And when I loaded it up, I got this weird black screen, but thankfully, because on the controller I could just Alt-Tab, I just Alt-Tabbed, I closed out of the game, I restarted the game, and then I got right back into it and it loaded my game just fine. I did not have to break out my keyboard and mouse. Everything worked on the controller by itself, which is what I was aiming to do. Also, I've been playing Space Marines 2 a bit on my gaming PC in my living room, and I really have to play this game more. I love Space Marines 2. But what I think I'm actually going to do is play through the entirety of Indiana Jones because that's gnawing at my brain right now and I'm really enjoying the game. Plus, playing in 4K with supreme settings from my living room on this little tiny gaming PC is just much better than the Xbox or anything else. So this is where I'm looking forward to be playing stuff just because the fidelity and what I can get out of it is superior to general consoles. Thank you very much to my YouTube channel members as well as my Patreon members. Your support really means the world to me, guys. I hope this video was informative. As always, guys, thank you for your time, and thanks for watching.